Hello, this is Caelan Huntress, and today I'm going to be talking about UX for the modern learner. This presentation is sponsored by Kineo APAC and was originally a part of TechWeek. TechWeek is a nationwide conference in the country of New Zealand that celebrates the technological innovation that's good for the world. Here's a list of the things that we're going to be discussing today. We're going to start by talking about the 6 facets of simplicity. Then we're going to go into some details about the modern learner, who they are and what we know about them. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kineo. And then we're going to talk about some specific usability concepts and how these have been applied to some of the clients that Kineo's worked on in the past. And I'm going to end with a challenge. So let's jump right in. Did you make a New Year's resolution this year? If you did, I hope you kept it. Or I hope you broke it. I'm a big proponent of breaking New Year's resolutions because they actually help you calibrate the kind of person that you want to be a lot better than just keeping every resolution. Those broken resolutions, though, they're really good clues about a few things. I want you to think about a New Year's resolution that you've broken in the past. You got it? Okay. Now, when you think about why you broke this resolution, is it on this list? Was it for one of these 6 reasons? The 6 items on this list correspond to what Dr. BJ Fogg called the 6 facets of simplicity. If the answer to any one of these questions is no, it's a lot easier to break a habit, to decide against doing something. If it's too complex, if it takes too much mental energy or physical energy, if it takes time or money, if it's something that other people aren't doing or that you're not used to doing, it's easy to say no. But if you can get a yes answer to every single one of these items on this list, then it's more likely that people will say, this is simple, I'll do it. And so when you're designing things for other people to use, applying the 6 facets of simplicity is a good way to ease the friction that happens when people start doing something differently. We want it to be as similar to what they're already doing and to what other people are doing as possible. We want it to be easy and inexpensive. And we want it to not take a lot of physical or mental effort. You could see this in mobile-first design. Mobile-first design is a website design method where you design for mobile first. Instead of designing a big, wide desktop website and then having a different version for mobile, many people now are designing for mobile first with responsive websites. And responsive, as you probably know, is a website term that describes how the layout of elements on a page rearrange themselves based on the width of the screen that it's being viewed on. And when you start with 300 pixels wide so that it looks good on a small smartphone first, it makes it easier for the user. And if we look at the 6 facets of simplicity in terms of the advantages of using a website on a mobile, a good mobile website, then the adoption of web design on mobile is a lot easier for people to use. The modern learner likes mobile websites because they don't have a lot of extra brain cycles. They don't have a lot of extra time or mental space or physical space to be doing more things. This is a graphic that was put together by Burson, and it gives us a lot of data about who the modern learner is and how much time they have available for learning. The most important metric on this sheet, I think, is the one right in the center, that 1% of a typical work week is all that employees have to focus on training and development. 1% of their time. So if they devote this tiny sliver of their time to learning something, and it's difficult for them to use, if it's hard for them to log in, if they can't figure out where they're supposed to go next or what they're supposed to do, we instantly lose them. So we need to make this 1% of time that they devote to their learning as easy and seamless as possible. This is a quote from one of our respondents from our Learning Insights survey, which we do every year to determine who is the modern learner and what are they like right now. And an L&D manager said that they want training on the skills they think they need, on a device they own, delivered at a time of their choosing. This is much different than the type of learner that we had 20 years ago. This is the Facebook generation. So we need to design things differently for them. That quote came from our Learning Insights 2018 report, which we've been doing every year since 2014. And you can download a copy at kineo.com/learntech. And it's a 49-page PDF that represents the research that we did into the types of learning that are most effective now. What learners are saying that they want. What L&D managers are facing as challenges. We examine these year to year because we mind the gap. There's this gap between the pace that technology changes and the ability of an organization to keep pace with that change. This gap is where we focus our attention. The services that Kineo provides shorten that gap. Kineo is a part of the City and Guilds group. City and Guilds was founded in London in 1878, 140 years ago. So they've been around for a while. And they were founded by a combination of 16 livery companies and the City of London Institute. And they created national standards for vocational training. So when guilds needed certified journeymen and craftspeople, they needed to define where the benchmarks are and how to certify that people have achieved these benchmarks. And City and Guilds has been working on this for centuries now. And over the last few decades, they've been making strategic acquisitions of other companies in order to help them move their mission online, to help organizations upskill their workforce through digital learning. And Kineo was one of those acquisitions. Kineo was founded in 2006 by a group of learning designers, and they originally focused on creating bespoke e-learning courses. Kineo Pacific was one of the co-founders of Totara, a popular learning management system. And so we have both the capability of designing the learning for enterprise workforces and delivering that learning. We've got branches all over the globe in many different continents, and we work with both national and local brands. We've done a lot of work with the public sector. We do a lot of work with government agencies who trust us because of our experience and our ability to deliver. Oftentimes when we're designing a piece of learning, we find that these are the two questions, or these are the two needs that we need to serve. Either I need help now, or I want to learn something new. And these two separate needs are best served by a different suite of offerings. For I need help now, we can provide a resource-based approach where the learner can go and search for the answers that they need through a library of different course content. For certifications or upskilling, when someone needs to learn something new, that's when we create a curriculum where there's stages that they have to go through. They finish one course, which leads to the next, which leads to the next. So these are very different learning models, but they address both of the main needs of the modern learner. Another quote from this year's Learning Insights report. Learning designers are creating destinations so that their learners can go somewhere to do something. It's a lot different than I have to tick this box. I need to get this course compliance certificate because it's a requirement for my job. It's a lot different to say, I'm going to go here and enrich myself. And that's what we want people to think when they go through their learning portal. We did this with Barclays, which is a global bank, and they went through a large culture shift. Communicating the different aspects of this culture shift through the different departments and the different branches around the world involved a lot of different learning design. Kineo wasn't the only partner to work with Barclays on this. We were one of a number, and we created the resource library that you see on the right. And many of the courses were short because these were soft skills that we were teaching people. We would offer short videos from heads of departments describing how they thought about the culture change. We would offer short PDFs so that when somebody wanted to go and get a little bit of enrichment, it wasn't so intimidating as registering for a 6-week multi-certification course. They could simply go in and enrich themselves briefly as their schedule allowed. And these are some of the principles that we used. These were developed by Nielsen. They're the 10 usability heuristics for user interface design. And I'm not going to go deeply into all of these, but I do want to highlight a few of them, especially this first one, the visibility of system status. With the Barclays portal on the left, we gave this visibility by allowing users the ability to pin courses that they wanted to take later. So when they logged in, they didn't have to sift through all of the material in the learning library every single time. They could do it once or twice, and then when they logged in, they saw the things that they had already self-curated as those items that would be interesting and relevant. With a structured approach, as on the right, where learners go through a progression, we use this visibility of system status through a progress bar, so that when someone logs in, they can see right at the top how far they've gone through the curriculum, and they can click on the exact spot where they left off to go precisely where they need to go. This good usability increases the likelihood that the learners are going to come here and use it in the future. We did some work with Rolls-Royce, who were upskilling their sales staff. They were rolling out new products. They had many different things that they needed to educate their sales staff about. But education online is different than education 30, 40 years ago. When many of us were kids and we sat in primary school and took a history test, in order to demonstrate our competency on the subject, we had to recall dates and names and show that we had remembered many different items from the history lesson. However, nowadays, we have Google. It's not important that somebody can recall all of the different details because the details are available for us at the end of any internet search. What's more important now is recognition. So with the Rolls-Royce case study, we ended up creating scenarios that would allow people to recognize when a specific feature was going to be a good match for a client. Because in usability online, recognition is more important than recall. With the immersive videos that we created, these would have been completely ineffective if we had a navigation menu on the sidebar and flashing banner ads all over the place, because the learner wouldn't know what to do next. And we created videos that involved on-screen interactions. And the only way that we could highlight the options for the user is by reducing the available number of options for them to take to the choices we wanted them to take in the course itself. So minimalist design is really effective for online learning. There's many other assets that we provide to support the education of a learner. And oftentimes this depends on what's going to be most effective for them. Some people learn really well from interactive video. Other people prefer to write things out by hand. And so we offer printable workbooks. If reading the text is really good for them to learn something, then we'll do text animations to display the relevant text in varying sizes of font so that it makes an impression. But what we don't want to do is throw all these into every course. You can overwhelm a learner really easily by providing them with too many options. And so instead of taking this entire list of our capabilities and throwing them into every project, we ask two questions. What's going to make this a great user experience? And what's going to help them do their job better? If we've thrown in too many options and too many mediums, then we come back to these two principles. We want a great user experience that's easy to access, and we want to help the learner do a better job. This is an acronym, MINDSPACE, that was developed in the UK Parliament to determine the psychological factors that influence the adoption of public policy. The UK Parliament undertook this study to determine what are those factors that we can use to improve the likelihood that a piece of policy will be adopted. And they identified these 9 items that make the acronym MINDSPACE. The messenger, the incentives, the norms, defaults, salience, priming, affect, commitments, and ego. The person who delivers information to us greatly influences our likelihood to agree with it or disagree with it. If someone that you know, that you like, and that you trust advises you to do something, it's much more likely than if it was delivered by somebody that you don't know, that you don't like, or that you don't trust. Even if the content of the material is the same, the messenger matters. The incentives count. If you're being incentivized, if a decision should go one way or another, that makes a big difference on your likelihood to agree with it. The norms are what other people are doing, and the defaults are what you've been doing already. The salience covers 2 things. It covers both what is new and novel and what is most relevant. The priming are the subconscious cues, the emotional effect that the policy and the adoption of it would create, the commitments that you've made that are affected by this. But the most important one here, I feel, is ego. If you can present something so that the outcome will increase the ego of the person who's making the decision, you have a much higher likelihood of getting them to say yes. So let's take a look at MINDSPACE being used in some work we did for Caterpillar. Caterpillar has a division that sells very large diesel engines for boats and barges out on the water. And we developed this learning portal for them. And right away, you're affected by the color scheme. The blue, the gold, the black, these really bold colors against each other, it makes it really visually pleasing. But if you notice, the global leaderboard, it doesn't share that effect. The design is actually rather bland, but it hits 4 other items on the MINDSPACE list. This global leaderboard provides incentives for people rising up in the ranks. It reinforces norms because you can see that other people in your organization are up on that list as well. It fills your ego because you want to be number 1 up at the top. And if you're on there at all, it takes a commitment to stay there. So even though the design of the global leaderboard isn't as powerful or compelling as the header above it, this leaderboard is still above the fold, right when the user logs in, because it increases the likelihood that they're going to come back. The members of this organization work in different specialties, and so we provide the defaults so that they can instantly access a group of resources that default to their segment. Instead of assessing people through a quiz, a self-assessment is a really effective way to engage someone's ego. And you simply ask them, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself? In terms of getting your learners to come back, this can be much more effective than providing a quiz where you give them a score. Let them self-assess themselves, because then their ego is invested in how much they know while using this platform. We can also provide badges for the ego and for incentives. And with this organization, Caterpillar was already providing podcasts internally. And so they were having members of the organization creating podcasts. And we took this material and put it into the learning portal because we knew the messenger was trusted. And it affected them by giving them an emotional connection to other members of their organization. To provide salience, we brought in content that was relevant to their interests. You can manually search the content out online and post the links in your LMS, or you can use content curation to identify when your targeted RSS feeds have new content that meet your filter criteria. So that way your content is dynamically updated automatically. We find content curation is a great way to keep learners engaged because it creates a different learning portal. Instead of showing up to a static environment where everything is just the same as the last time they logged in, if there's something new and relevant every time, then it makes the learning portal a destination. We also like to personalize our portals for the learners. And there's a few different methods that we can do that, content curation being one of the easiest. If you can select your learners' interests, then you can filter the content curation based on those interests and provide the most relevant articles for them to read. You can also customize a menu based on their position, their interests, or a number of other metrics so that the top level menus only show what's most relevant to the learner. The FAQ is a great way to personalize for your organization as a whole. It's best if you can get your learners to type their questions in their own language, and then save these questions so that that database of questions your learners are asking creates the outline for your FAQ. If a new learner comes into your LMS and they see a list of the typical questions that others before them have had with answers, then it creates a real personalized environment where the specific questions that they're asking, not that the L&D managers are asking, but that the employees are asking, are being addressed. Storytelling is one of the most effective ways to engage a learner because it provides the context for the situations that they're typically going to face. Again, this goes back to recognition rather than recall. We don't want them to memorize things that they can easily look up on Google. We want to provide them with scenarios and ask them how they would respond. And by pairing these scenario-based questions with discussion, then you can actually have your learners comparing notes with each other on the best ways that they would approach a situation. And this engages the innate expertise in your organization to help your entire organization teach each other. And this was another outcome from the Learning Insights report. If you have a forum where any employee can ask a question and the CEO can drop in and provide an answer, it greatly increases the engagement level among the members of the organization. This is a chart that helps us examine how do we get people to do what we want them to do. First, we define the target behavior. Is it log into the LMS? Is it take the required number of courses? Is it come back here of their own accord without any external motivation? We identify what's the target behavior that we want the learners to do. We use the 6 factors of simplicity, which you can see in the lower right: time, money, physical effort, brain cycles, social deviance, and non-routine. We identify what's complex and how can we make it simpler. We also look at the core motivators. Are people going to do this because they have to and they're being required? Are people going to do this because it will increase their social standing among their peers? By asking these questions, what are the motivations here, you might find some additional motivations that you're not using, and you can retarget your entire campaign based on new motivations. But the most important one here, I feel, is the behavior triggers. And a trigger, as defined by Charles Duhigg in The Power of Habit, is one of the levers that you can use in order to modify behavior. If you can identify the trigger for taking a target behavior, then you can present that trigger at the right time and in the right context. Maybe the trigger is an email reminder. Maybe the trigger is someone mentioning an LMS course around the water cooler. Maybe the trigger is a feeling of dissatisfaction that they don't know an answer. Whatever the trigger is, if you can identify clearly what the trigger is and what the motivators are, then you can create a pathway towards the target behavior. And you need a system when learning design is moving so very fast. This graphic goes through the different phases that learning design has evolved through over the last couple of decades. When online learning first started, it took the format of learning as it had been done for the last couple of centuries. There's a teacher, they hold all the knowledge, they meet with a group of students who ask questions, the teacher gives assignments, the students give back their answers, and the teachers grade them. The online university format was how online learning started, because that was education as we knew it. As time went on, the format evolved, the philosophies evolved, the users evolved, and the systems evolved. And where we are right now is between continuous learning and digital learning. We know we're going somewhere into AI using machine learning and using AI algorithms to determine what's going to be taught next and how is it going to be delivered. We don't know a whole lot about that because, as Arthur C. Clarke famously said in 1953, any prediction of the future is either going to seem so outlandish that none of your peers in the present would believe it, or it will fall so radically short of what actually happens that your prediction will be unusable. And it was with this caveat that in 1953, Arthur C. Clarke predicted Twitter. And he said, using 1953 language, that because of the advances in satellite communication, that at some point in the future, you'd be able to have a conversation with one of your friends who is somewhere else on the world and not know their geographical location. And he described many of the things that we see every day in Twitter. But at the time he made that prediction, it sounded outlandish. And so with that in mind, the only real predictions we can make about AI in terms of learning would similarly be outlandish. And I'm personally not well read enough about many of the different facets of this fascinating field to make any solid predictions, but I can see where some of the interesting work is happening through places like Khan Academy. And Khan Academy is, it started when, I think his name was Salman Khan. He started tutoring his 14-year-old niece in mathematics and recorded these videos of him demonstrating with a dry erase board mathematical concepts. It was really effective. And he posted these videos on YouTube and other people started learning from them. And it was so popular that Khan Academy is now used on tablets in many primary schools. And the teacher has become a facilitator, allowing the individual students to learn at their own rate. And the video tutorials give a really unique feature that previous methods of education didn't have. With a video tutorial that you're watching yourself, if there's a concept that you don't get, you can scroll back in the video and re-watch a certain section again and again until you get it. If you're sitting in a classroom full of dozens of your peers, you can't ask the teacher to stop and go back again and again and again until you get it. But that's something that we now have the capability to do in our classrooms. And what's really interesting here is that scrolling back of the video, that's data we can record. And artificial intelligence can examine that data and say, hey, everybody who meets these characteristics are scrolling over this piece many, many times. Maybe this needs to be its own course. Learners who fit these characteristics typically go through these courses very fast, and so they don't need the entire lesson plan, they just need the overviews. Machine learning will begin to make personalized recommendations based on its assessment of how you learn. And so that's what we see coming up sometime in the future, is personalized learning to a level that we can't quite fathom right now. But we're not there yet. The work that Kineo does is focused on where we are now and the next few steps ahead. Things like micro-learning, things like real-time video, providing learning when it's needed. These are the things that we focus on. And so based on who the modern learner is today, based on the tools that we have available right now, these are the principles that we use to guide our learning design. The learning needs to be effective, relevant, and intuitive. It needs to be delivered to the channels that the learners are using. It's got to engage them emotionally and mentally. It has to be provided when they need it, not just in case. And ultimately, it needs to be useful. If it's not going to be useful to them, they're not going to devote that tiny sliver of time that they have available to devote to learning. They're not going to invest their time there. So we need to make sure that the time that learners are spent in their own self-education needs to be productive and turn them into a better worker. So, to close this out, I'd like to challenge you to rethink how you currently deliver your learning. See if you can identify the 6 facets of simplicity in regards to your own learning. Where's the complexity? And how can you simplify it? After that, I want you to look at your learners. Ask yourself what their motivations are and what their triggers are. And finally, most importantly, what are you trying to achieve with your learning? This foundational, fundamental question that can realign everything that you've been working on in your project is invigorating and frightening when you ask it of yourself. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in a room where a learning designer says, wait, hold up, back up. What is it we're trying to achieve here? And learning designers are really good at that, at zooming out to the big picture to make sure that the effort that's being put into a project is actually going to achieve the goal. And if you don't know the goal, you could be building the wrong thing. By knowing the goal, you can design your entire learning interaction to guide your learners towards the end goal that you want them to achieve. So that has been the presentation for UX for the Modern Learner. Thanks so much for watching. Reach out anytime with questions.